Stop the insanity. Get your focus back onto what really matters in life. Your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. Sit back, listen, and change the trajectory of your life. You are listening to the Money for Life podcast. Let's welcome your hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
All right, everyone, this is Rick Sapio with my partner, Teresa Kuhn. Man, I love partnering with you on Money for Life. We want you to be the best in 4 areas: your family, your finances, your future, and obviously your faith. Your faith, it's important. It seems like people don't really trust. And I always found that when I trust, that everything's going to be fine, the odds of being fine are much, much more increased. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. We're going to talk about how to get a job on the Titanic. What does that mean, Teresa?
Rick, the Titanic sunk, right?
Did the Titanic sink? I thought it was the most glorious, well-built, massive, incredible invention of all time. It sank?
It actually sank, and that was the story, right? So that's what they're saying, that it actually sank. And there's a little bit of history around the Titanic, but I don't think that's what you're referring to. What are you referring to when you say how to get a job on the Titanic?
How to get a job on the Titanic? All right, well, how to get a job on the Titanic. Let me think about this. So first, I have to sing your good graces right now. So what I love about you is you came from an incredible background. Your parents were born and raised in Cuba, and they were very accomplished. And then the communist regime came in, and they were terrorized, and they left with zero money in their pocket. How much money did they have in their pocket when they landed in Florida?
When they landed in Miami, they actually had to borrow a dime from a police officer to make a phone call to let someone know that they were there. It's an amazing story. Actually, my background, my heritage is mostly Spanish. I've done the DNA testing, and it's fascinating to see, the DNA in the background. And I'm mostly from Spanish. And my parents are from Cuba, and they came over in 1961. And one of my most fondest memories of growing up is listening to their stories and their friends' stories of how they left Cuba. And they had a very comfortable middle class background, very professional. And when they came to Miami, they weren't the only ones that came penniless. Many of their friends came penniless. And to start over completely from scratch with nothing.
Amen. So, I think about my background. My parents were raised incredibly poor, both of them, by immigrant Italian parents. You just think about, what they went through. They had to get on a boat with little babies and come over the Atlantic. They had never been out of their hometown. And they go to a new country, risk of death, risk of anything. And, I think about today, the risk we take. You think about the coronavirus, it's horrible. We got to stay home with our big screen TVs and our video games and our social media and all our electronics. It's horrible. How does that compare to what our parents went through, and our great grandparents and all of them, all the way up the chain, went through the terror that they had to ensue. So a little bit different perspective, but that's how this story unfolds, how to get a job on the Titanic. But let me continue to brag on you. So you decided to get a law degree, make your parents proud, and then you discovered that you really wanted to help people live a great life and be financially secure. So you're the conservative one, and I'm the crazy entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since my dad died when I was 13. I'm the 7th of 10 babies. Many of you know that. I grew up in North Jersey, just outside New York City. And the interesting thing about you and I is we were both born in 1963. Just after Kennedy was shot.
Can't believe you admitted that.
I'm sorry. Teresa was 83. And, it's just incredible times. I remember the 60s. I remember the moon landing. I remember all the craziness of the 70s and all that insanity. So, they think about, we have between us, we've seen thousands and thousands of tens of thousands, I would say, clients managing money and what they do with money and the mistakes they made. And then we've got the experience of both being parents. And all of that plays into this topic, how to get a job on the Titanic. So here's what I think. I was inspired by an Adam Carolla, I don't know if it was a podcast, I don't know where he said this, but he said, here's the problem today. He said, it's something I say, but I love his way of saying it better. He said, we got these kids and they grow up from 0 to 35 with bubble wrap around them. And he goes, it's akin to going through life and never experiencing gravity. And the first time you experience gravity, like you're in the real world and you get a job and your boss says, you're not really doing what the company needs you to do. And you go, oh, what? My mom always said, do your best. And you're like, well, your best isn't good enough right now. Here's the objectives. You got to do your best. But my mom said, do what makes you happy too. And I'm really not happy having you talk to me that way. So what are we preparing our kids for? We're preparing our kids for absolute and total chaos in their life. It's as if they're going through life and they get their feet on the ground finally and they realize, holy shit, this is the Titanic. I didn't learn anything about real life. The only thing I learned was how to get a job on the Titanic. And the Titanic, as you pointed out so clearly, doesn't exist. What do you think? You and I are working on this project, the 100-Year Education, and we've already done a podcast on this where we talk about what you did with your son, who never went to college, which I think is awesome. What do kids need to learn today?
Oh boy, there's that old book, Everything I Need to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. I think it was the old school kindergarten, though. It wasn't today's kindergarten. How to be polite, how to say please and thank you, how to show up on time and do what you say you're going to do, keep your promises, right? Even if it's hard, not when it's easy, when it's hard, especially. And a lot of kids today are being raised, if it's hard, I can step back and it's okay. If things are not the way I want them to be, if I complain enough, I'm going to get my way. The teacher said something mean to me. Johnny said something mean to me. Sally did this to me on the schoolyard. And then the parents show up and fight their kids' battles. If you came home from school, Rick, when you were younger, and you had an issue with a schoolmate, were your parents going to show up to school to help you?
It gets worse. I remember in 6th grade, I was a punk, and my teacher, Mr. Haneko, 6th grade, my dad was dying. It was really bad, and I was lashing out. I'm getting a little emotional as I tell the story. And Mr. Haneko said, Sapio, stay behind. And I said, what? Why am I staying behind? He goes, stay behind. And I sat in my chair, and he goes, come here. And I went over to him. I go, what? He goes, come with me. And I followed him into the basement. And he he said, I don't want you to cause any trouble in my class anymore. And I said, what are you going to do about it? And he clocked me right in the nose. And I went on the ground. And as I was getting up, he kicked me in the stomach. And as I was getting up, he punched me again. And he did it for like, I don't know. It seemed like forever. It was probably 2 minutes. And I was an angel after that. I needed to get my ass kicked. And you know what? A lot of people need to get their ass kicked. And guess what I did when I got home?
You said nothing.
I apologized to my parents for being a tough kid. Tough to raise. It was a turning point in my life. And I think there's a lot of people in the world that haven't experienced real life, like cause and effect, like paying for problems that they cause. And what we're doing is we're raising these kids with bubble wrap, and it's destroying them. I thought about this for a long time in preparation for this podcast, and it goes like this. If I don't care where you sit politically, but if I take something from you because you're wealthy, and I, not you meaning anybody listening, and I give it to somebody else for free, what I just did was I disempowered two people. Now let's think about the society or the world. If I take something from 100 million people and I give it to 100 other million people, I just disempowered 200 million people. And so let's go back to what you said, common sense. And I love how you raised your son. You said to your son, look, I've saved up some money for college, but I don't think college is really gonna serve you. Uh, and you instead got him in business. You helped him start a business, and now he's 24 and he's really successful in business, and his confidence exploded, and he's experiencing gravity. So I think about it like this. My son's 12, and he said, Daddy, I want to get a cell phone. I said, really? That's awesome. Work and pay for it, and you could have a cell phone, but not until you're 15, because it's just my house and I make the rules. And he's like, so wait. None of my friends' parents made their kids pay for their cell phones. I said, well, you could live with one of your friends, I guess, if you want. You don't have to live here, but that's my rule. So here's the thing. If you want something, you have to creatively figure out how to earn the money, and then you could have it. Isn't that common sense? I mean, what's going on here? So oftentimes, Teresa, you and I think about, what's the big idea? What do we want people to get out of the podcast? And I want something very simple. I want society to pull their head out of their ass. As a society, how hard is it for us to believe that we have to earn things in life and not be given things in life? When we are given things in life, we are massively disempowered. So what are we doing? We're training generations of people how to get a job on the Titanic. In other words, how to be completely ill-equipped for the real world because they have skills that are designed for something that doesn't exist. So let's talk about your son and what you did. Tell the audience what you did with Keating, starting about the time when he was thinking about going, I think Colorado State, the gummy bear capital of the world.
Yes, it was Colorado State. And let me preface by saying a little bit about my husband's background, because it certainly colored how we raised our child. I think moms are wired from a hormonal perspective, from an emotional perspective, to parent differently than fathers. And I know this is extremely politically correct what I'm about to say, but I think God designed both men and women to raise a child, because we raise children differently. Biologically, we raise children differently. And so if I was the only one who had raised my child would be a very different person than the perspective and the training and the love that he got from my husband. My husband actually in 7th grade went to live in an orphanage. Sorry, that's wrong. My husband at age 4 or 5 went to live in an orphanage, and in 7th grade went back and lived with his father. Totally supported himself through high school and college. Worked at the night shift at a 7-Eleven for many years. Totally and completely a self-made man. So how different do you think he raised my son than I did, right? What perspective did he bring to that parenting? A very different perspective. And it certainly colored how I parented. We didn't always agree. In fact, there were many times that we did not agree, right? And it was more in terms of, me wanting to protect my son and him saying, look, we're raising him to be a man. Well, when my son was in high school and it was time for him to go to college, and he said he wanted to study entrepreneurship, and we had shopped at colleges, we had done the tours, we did everything, right? My heart was so heavy, Rick, because in my heart, I knew this absolutely was a huge mistake. We were getting ready to make a $250,000 decision, because really college at the end of the day, most students don't finish in 4 years, and including tuition and room and board and everything else, it was at least $50,000 a year. And we gave him the proposition. We said, look, you want to do business. You don't want to study business. And if you do certain things, we will take that money and start a business, and you will be so far along all your peers who went to school to study business. And he followed our direction, and he trusted us, which, bless his heart, that was a big, big trust. I mean, he really put his future in our hands with that advice, because
But
every
Teresa, look at how much partying he missed out on, and sex with strangers, and
thank
marijuana at Colorado State. He missed
God.
out on some really important life lessons.
Do you know where my son was on Friday nights? His what would have been his freshman and sophomore years. He
Where
was
was he?
sleeping because he had to wake up at 3:30 o'clock in the morning every single morning to go to his apprenticeship. So for 2 years, he was up at 3:30 in the morning. And on Friday nights, that boy was exhausted. Do you know how happy I was that he was learning something that could benefit him for the rest of his life instead of living that life of chaos and craziness? And I know what people are thinking. They're saying you deprived him of his youth, of having a good
Wait,
time.
how dare you make a man out of him? That's horrible, Teresa. You made a man out of this 24-year-old guy. It's horrible.
And if you were to meet him today, oh my gosh, you know what it is? We are recording on a Saturday, and guess where he is? He is
Where-
building his empire. He is with his team that he is leading, working today on a Saturday. And he left the house at 8 o'clock in the morning. How cool is that?
It's awesome. And he's home living with you because he's saving his money, and he's got a team, and he's installing heating and air conditioning units that he had an apprentice to learn how to do. What an awesome story. I think about this kid that I mentored for 2 years, and his name is Billy. And I'll never forget, like he said, yeah, Rick, I really want to work for you. I want to work for you. So I finally hired him after mentoring him. He worked in my office, and, I would give him objectives for the month or the week to do. And, he'd start them the first day. And then the second day he's not doing them. And I would go, Billy, what's going on? And he said, well, my mother always taught me, do what makes you happy. And yesterday those goals excited me, but today they don't. And I would go, Billy, you don't understand. I work out every day. I'm older. I work out every single day. You think I like getting up at 5 a.m. to work out? I hate it, but I'm fulfilled because I'm in shape and I've got energy. You don't do things that you like. You do things that you commit to. When you're married, Billy, and you're married for 50 years, your marriage is going to have ups and downs. And guess what? You got a commitment to your marriage. If your marriage doesn't make you happy on a day, do you get divorced? And he looks at me and he says, probably. I go, probably? What? So I was absolutely furious. I had to fire this guy, but I'll never forget, before I fired him, I called his mother. Her name is Deborah, and I actually casually knew Deborah. And I go, Deborah, can I ask you a question? She goes, yeah, Rick, hi, how's it going with Billy? I said, well, that's the problem. I got a question for you. Did you tell Billy when he was younger, do what makes you happy? She goes, oh, yes, I told him that every single day, do what makes you happy. And I said, when he was on the golf team in high school, what happened? She goes, the golf team? I said, yeah, remember we talked about this once. She goes, yeah. Like, he didn't like it anymore, so he quit after 2 weeks. I go, yeah. And you remember when he played football? She goes, yeah, he didn't like that, he quit. I said, you know what? My kids are not allowed to quit. If they join a sport, they have to commit for 5 years. And guess what? They're not allowed to do team sports until they're 12. So my son just had his first opportunity. Here's the point. We are destroying our kids. Why are we doing that? We're preparing them for a job on the Titanic. Um, to me, and I started this nonprofit, as you know, called the Billion Entrepreneurs, because there's roughly 1 billion homes in the world. And I had this dream. What if there was an entrepreneur in every home? What would life be like? And what is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is only this. It's anyone, no matter where they're from, no matter how much money they have, 10 cents like your dad, or if they're wealthy, anyone who decides at this moment to take responsibility for outcomes. That's an entrepreneur. And you created an entrepreneur with Keating, and I'm creating an entrepreneur with my 4 kids. That's what this is about. If you could create entrepreneurs with your kids and grandkids, wow, what a wonderful world this would be. It would be incredible. So don't get me started. I am on fire right now because we are creating people who are prepared for the Titanic instead of creating people that are prepared for anything. Take responsibility for outcomes. So when you think about Keating, because I mean, man, your story is so powerful. What would you tell parents is the most important things that they should be thinking about if they're going to prepare a child to actually have their own business and employees and be excited to get up at 3:30 a.m. or as you said, 3:30 o'clock. I don't talk that way. I say 3:30 a.m. What would you say?
I should have said 3:30 a.m., Rick. But anyways, what would I tell them? Gosh, I would tell them so many things. Follow, uh, it's about making sure they understand their responsibilities in life, right? And follow your heart when it comes to knowing how to love and raise that child. Do not follow what society says. Do not follow what the books say necessarily. I knew for my son what was right for him, and I knew college absolutely was not right for him. I knew he was an entrepreneur. In high school, he was voted most likely to be a billionaire. Isn't that funny? I remembered that the other day because he had this curiosity about life, and he loved to work. In high school, he had two options. He could do sports or he could work, but we weren't going to have a child at home that wasn't doing anything. And so he chose not to do sports. He got a job, and that job taught him so much about life. And guess where he was on Friday and Saturday nights? Common theme in my house. He was working.
In high school, yeah.
In
And I
high
knew him
school.
so here's
Every
the
Friday and Saturday night, he was working. And so I would say, follow your heart. Do not follow mainstream society. What they say is best for your child.
yeah, here's the other thing. We have to be conscious. In this program, we always talk about your actions need to be conscious. Most people make decisions unconsciously. So they're taking actions that are unconscious and not related to a purpose or values or any of that stuff. And we try to push these values on you that we think make sense: simplicity, probability, and leverage. You want to have a simple life. You want to increase the probability that you're successful and your kids are successful in the four areas that we talk about in Money for Life. And you want to leverage existing relationships and what you have. And so, I feel like most parents and grandparents, they're creating dependence as opposed to independence. The minute you put in a child's hand, I don't care what age they are, an iPad or a cell phone, you're creating dependency on something that is highly addictive. We already know it's addictive. Why the hell are you doing it? Why don't you put a rake in their hand, tell them to knock on their neighbor's door, and ask them for $1 to rake their front yard? Allow them to get outside their comfort zone, because guess what, fellas and girls, life is hard. If you don't get outside your comfort zone, guess what happens? Nothing. You sit home sucked into social media or anti-social media. Let me ask you a question. This is a really, really incredible question. You know all these actors and actresses, and you know all these podcast people, and you know all these famous sports stars and all that, and all these friends. And let me ask you a question. God forbid something bad happens to you. How many of those friends will show up and be by your side on your deathbed? How many? Why are you wasting valuable hours of your life on bullshit? Why? Find your purpose. Get a list of values. Figure out what you want to create. But stop following this addiction, dependency, vicious cycle that ultimately is the Titanic. And that's what's happening, folks. Teresa, I love working with you. I love the story about Keating. We are having a lot of fun with Money for Life, and I look forward to many more podcasts with you.
Rick, and I love your passion and commitment to elevate the conversation and have the tough conversations. It is politically incorrect. We're not politically correct, and
Wait,
someone's
wait,
got to
wait.
be a voice.
Time out. What the hell is politically correct or incorrect even mean? How about common sense? How about, holy shit, common sense means I actually have to work for something. Wow, that's a new thought. I remember you go, oh, you got me started now. And I'll let you close us out. But when my dad was really sick and he was about to die, we had no money. And my mother, was freaking out about money. And she's like, you got to deliver the New York Daily News. I said, the New York Daily News, I'm 11. And every day at 4:30 a.m. I hated that sound. It was ba-boom, a big stack of newspapers, 200 if I remember correctly, was delivered, and they had to be delivered before 5:30 a.m. If it was raining or snowing, they all had to be wrapped a certain way, put in a plastic bag, rubber band around them. They couldn't be tossed. I had to walk up and put them between the door, because otherwise sometimes people would come out and run after me. I did that for 2 years, and you know what happened at 4:30 every day? Get out of bed, you son of a bitch! And my mother would pull the blankets off, and I'd be freezing. I don't want to do it. But that's what it took in our family. That's what it took. So I'm going to give it back to you, my partner, Teresa.
Amazing story. As one would say, you were probably somewhat abused emotionally as a child, and it made you resilient. There's good and bad with that story, and look what you've been able to accomplish. And so thank you for showing up like you did today, Rick, on fire, passionate, to bring value, to make people think consciously instead of just operating unconsciously. This is Money for Life. Be well.
You have just experienced Money for Life. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. Have a blessed day.